And in this session, we are joined by partners who have worked on the newly launched report, Protected Bicycle Lanes, Protect the Climate, and the accompanying cycle lane modeling tool. There's a lot of evidence that growing cycling infrastructure brings immense benefits to people's health, the environment, and to the city itself, like increasing its efficiency. This tool helps predict greenhouse gas reductions that can be expected from planned bicycle lane networks in any city with just a few easy to follow steps. If you have not had a chance to check it out yet, you can click the link in the chat, and I'm dropping the link to download the report right now. And there is also a tool available on that same website. Also, this is in lieu of the Cycling Cities campaign. The Cycling Cities campaign is facilitating knowledge exchange and technical support through best practices and tools to the network of pledged cities and partners working on increasing safe cycling. So please check out the Cycling Cities campaign space as well. Finally, I welcome today's session moderator and the panelists. First, we'll hear from Sheila Watson, Deputy Director at FIA Foundation, about the significance of the study. Sheila will also moderate the session with the panelists. Next, we'll welcome Taylor Rich, who is a Senior Research Associate at Global. They will talk about the process and methodology of this work, also why the network of protected bike lanes makes such an impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Following that, Maria Fernanda Bernal, also called MAFE, who is the Safe and Sustainable Mobility Lead at Despacio, will discuss how Bogota has advanced with development of protected cycle lanes, and what does that tell us in terms of the environmental impacts and city policies. And finally, we'll also hear from our guest speaker, Philip Amaral, Director of Policy and Development at the European Cyclists Federation, who is joining us to share some reactions and insights. So with that, I would like to hand it off to Sheila to lead us through the rest of the program.
Thank you very much, Ivona. Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. And my goodness, what do I say? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, with people from so many different places. I think we're covering pretty much every time zone. So thank you all for tuning in. The study that we're launching today, which FIA Foundation have supported and which the excellent team at ITDP have led, is an incredibly significant piece of work. I think we probably all think that somebody somewhere must have thought about the climate and carbon savings and benefits of cycling, but actually there's very little work on that issue. And when you consider the absolutely vital part which walking and cycling must play, and scooting and other forms of non-motorized mobility must play, if we are going to achieve the 1.5 degree objectives, which are now the framework in which we operate, then this sort of evidence, this clear evidence of the benefits, the CO2 benefits, which Taylor will tell us much more about in a moment, of cycling, is a vital contribution to the evidence base. So at FIA Foundation, where we as a philanthropy support work around the whole issue of safety and sustainable mobility, we're delighted that this piece of work has been undertaken. We're delighted to partner with ITDP on it, and indeed part of the Cycling Cities initiative, under the umbrella of which this piece of work is being launched. And we would echo what I want to said to you earlier. Do tune into that, look at it, and think whether or not there's something there that you can join, because I think an initiative which really shares good practice and really brings cities together to consider these very important issues and solutions with a tool such as the one that's being launched today really is a hugely valuable contribution, as I say. So the evidence that was gathered and will be shared with us in a moment in this study is novel, and the usefulness of this, I think, is undoubted. And I'm sure that many of you will have already had a chance to take a look at the report. I hope we'll do that, delve deep. There are so many amazing nuggets in there. I don't want to steal any of Taylor's thunder by being specific about them, but even just the analysis of the savings in economic terms that came from protected cycle lanes in the two cities which were examined struck me as being phenomenal. Savings also in terms of lives not lost, which is an issue which FIA Foundation also cares hugely about. And then, of course, these wonderful examinations of the benefits of money spent in the non-motorized sector. And this is an issue, finally, before we turn to the presentations, which, as I say, is very close to our hearts at FIA Foundation. And that is why today we're actually launching, along with our two partners and several other supporting organizations, something called the Partnership for Active Travel and Health. That partnership will seek to go a little beyond cycling to include walking, but also to advocate and to use evidence just like this report today, and indeed a report which we're publishing today on the broader issues of walking and cycling, use that evidence to press the case and support the campaigns for this aspect of our mobility challenge to be given just as much attention as some of those other aspects, which are often a little more glitzy and shiny, are given at the moment. So, as I say, delighted to be part of this study, delighted to work with ITDP. And I'm now, with no further ado, going to hand over to one of the lead authors, Taylor, and I know he will then pass us to Mafe, and both of them will present the content of the report. So over to you, Taylor.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really my honor to share this research with you. Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay? Great. So thank you so much to Ivona for your help facilitating, and Sheila for the very kind introduction. I'm going to try and go through this quickly. I'd like to get to the discussion. That's always the most interesting part of a webinar. As Ivona mentioned, this report came out just this week. It's available for download on ITDP's website, and I believe also on the FIA Foundation's website. If you remember nothing else from this webinar, I want you to remember this, that citywide networks of protected bicycle lanes are a cost-effective way of reducing emissions and creating economic value. I'm going to walk through each one of these three key phrases. I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by each, and how that can be useful to you. So, what do I mean when I say citywide networks of protected bicycle lanes? There's three parts here. Citywide. This is a map of the people who live within a 300-meter, like kind of a 5-minute walk of protected bicycle lane in Bogota, Colombia. It covers not everyone. I think it's something like 50 or 60% of people, but it covers the entire city. It means that you can bicycle from one side of the city to the other side entirely on protected lanes. It's more than just a neighborhood, it's all of the neighborhoods and all of the areas. Networks. So there aren't just individual bicycle lanes in each neighborhood. The bicycle lanes all connect to one another so that you don't ever have to leave a bicycle lane to get to another one. You can just go continuously from one to another. This is a map of the planned network of bicycle protected lanes in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Finally, what do I mean by protected lanes? I mean that cyclists are physically protected by something substantial and permanent from vehicle traffic. This is an example of an intersection in Bogota. You can see that not only do the cyclists have lanes going each direction on the street that are protected from traffic by these wide grassy medians. They even have a protected intersection so that it's possible for cyclists to cross from one street to the other without ever being directly exposed to car traffic. This is among the best cycling design in the world, and it really makes everyone feel safe riding a bicycle. Anyone, as they say, from age 8 to age 80 would feel comfortable and safe and secure riding a bicycle in these conditions. And you can see just how many people are riding their bicycles. So these kinds of networks of protected bicycle lanes are a cost-effective way of reducing emissions. Now, how did we find that out? So the slide gets a little in-depth, but basically what we did was we picked 2 case study cities, Bogota, Colombia, and Guangzhou, China. We chose these cities because they already have good, but not totally complete networks of protected bicycle lanes. But other than that, Bogota and Guangzhou are totally different cities. They're opposite sides of the world, different cultures, different histories. And so we figured, okay, if something is true in Bogota and it's also true in Guangzhou, we hope that means that it's true universally, that it would be true in any other city, any other middle-income city around the world. So having picked Bogota and Guangzhou, basically we did a survey of cyclists. We asked them, if you weren't bicycling today, if the protected bicycle lanes did not exist in your city, how would you have gotten to where you're going? And they might say bus, they might say car, they might say they would walk, they might say they wouldn't have made the trip at all. We write that down. And then we take the percentage of people who said they would have traveled by car if the protected bicycle lanes did not exist. And we multiply that percentage by an estimate of the total number of kilometers traveled on the bicycle lanes every year, which we got by doing counts of cyclists. If you'd like more detail on this, I'm happy to share it later, or you can take a look at the report, but I don't want to get bogged down in these details right now. And then we multiplied the amount of bicycling by the percent shifting from car to bicycle and by the amount of emissions per kilometer driven in a car. And then we got the emissions reduction due to bicycle lanes. This was about 16,000 tons per year in Guangzhou or 22,000 tons per year in Bogota. And we tried throughout this to be conservative. We tried to underestimate the amount of emissions because this doesn't include second order effects like second order reduction in driving because of narrower lanes for cars. It doesn't count bicycling that isn't on protected lanes. It doesn't count indirect improvements in public transit, etc. And we found that building protected bicycle lanes in middle-income countries is a highly cost-effective way of reducing greenhouse gases. Networks of protected bicycle lanes prevent the emission of as many as almost 5,000 tons of greenhouse gases per $1 million spent on infrastructure over 20 years. This is more than bus rapid transit. It's more than car electrification in high-income countries, and it's considerably more than metro urban rail. Of course, bus rapid transit, car electrification, and metro are all extremely important and should be funded. These are complementary to bicycle lanes. We need all of them. We cannot just build bicycle lanes and expect that to solve all of our problems. Just like we can't just build metro, we can't just electrify cars and expect that to solve all of our problems. Of course, highways, any construction of road infrastructure for cars will cause a lot of emissions per dollar spent on infrastructure. So how can you use this? We've made this modeling tool. It's available, Ivona, if you might put the link in the chat. This modeling tool is available on our website. You can use it in Excel or in Google Sheets. And you can put in some very, very basic information about your city. You just need to know population, the size of a planned bicycle network, and a rough estimate of the current modal split in that city. And this model will tell you, a rough estimate of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that you can expect. So we hope that this tool will be useful for funders and financiers, national governments, development banks, city governments, as well as for advocates who are trying to make the case for protected bicycle lanes. But protected bicycle lane networks are not only important for the climate, they're also important for our city's economies. They are a cost-effective way of creating economic value. We were able to measure only two, of the economic impacts of protected bicycle lanes in Bogota and Guangzhou. We were not able to include economic benefits from time savings, which were considerable. Reduced air pollution, land value uplift, reduced costs of maintaining highways, etc. We found that the Bogota network of protected bicycle lanes cost about $130 million to build. This is a rough estimate. We weren't able to get any official governmental figures. It saves about $80 million per year just in travel savings, just in people being able to bicycle instead of riding transit, and thereby saving the cost of a transit fare. The benefits of public health are even greater. Because bicycling is an excellent form of physical exercise, it reduces premature deaths from non-communicable disease significantly. And this has a major economic benefit to the entire city in reduced healthcare costs and in, of course, the economic value of those people continuing to live and contribute to society. Compared to these benefits in travel cost savings and physical exercise and public health, the costs of building the network are almost negligible. If cities are only willing to allocate the street space and a small amount of money to building these networks, the costs are small and the benefits are enormous. I hope this will be useful. We hope this will be useful for cities, for funders and financiers, and for advocates. And we thank you so much for joining us today, and hope you'll stick around for some discussion. I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for your presentation. And I know already we have 3 questions in the box, so you've excited a great deal of interest. But I think what we might do is move on to Mafe and have the second half of the presentation, which talks really specifically about Bogota, and then we'll come back to your questions. So thanks to everyone who's popped one in the question box. And Mafe, over to you.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me a minute. Okay. Well, what I'm going to tell you is more or less the story of how in Bogota we got to the results that Taylor shared with us this morning. So hello, everyone. My name is Maria Fernanda Ramirez, and I am a civil engineer and urban planner from Colombia. I'm currently the Safe and Sustainable Mobility Lead at Despacio. We are an NGO who works on making people's lives better in cities. We work in Colombia, in Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, different countries in Latin America, in different cities. We advise governments. We develop capacity building processes. We share publications, and we are really happy. We were really happy when Taylor contacted us from ITDP to work with them on this study, and we led the entire survey collection and information from the Secretary of Mobility. So this is kind of more or less the story of how we got there. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. Is one of the few tips from Bogota before the pandemic, what happened during the pandemic, and some of the programs that we understand that we're part of how we got there. And the first thing that we need to understand is that Bogota's local government has a goal of lowering our contamination levels, and it has a goal of lowering everything to 150,000 tons of CO2 and about 30 tons of particulate matter. We want to take those away or stop emitting those or stop that kind of pollution. To be able to do that, Bogota has bought about almost 1,500 electric buses, but we know that's not going to be enough. We know that buses are a big source of pollution, but now we understand that, well, like Taylor mentioned, that the active mobility, especially bikes, can help us reduce that impact, not only because we're not using as many vehicles or as many buses, we are letting someone else use those bus seats if we use the bicycles. And of course, people are going to be able, and this is something that we saw from the surveys, is that people are going to be able to, if people feel more comfortable and safe on those protected bike lanes, they're going to use them. If people don't feel protected, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to use the bike lanes. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things, a couple of numbers that you might be interested in. And this couple of graphs. The first one, the one on the left, is the one from the Bogota's household survey from 2019. And it's the one, and then this one, if you can see here, it shows us that bicycle mode split was about 6.6%. Keep that number in mind. We are a medium-sized city compared to bigger cities in the world. We're a medium-sized city. It's not a bad number. But in 2020, the pandemic hit and everybody stopped moving. And little by little, and we know this from one of some of ITDP studies and presentations, that Bogota was one of the very few or first countries or cities that started implementing temporary or emerging bicycle lanes throughout the city, so people could move around instead of using the private car to be isolated, to be able to move on a clean and non-expensive way. So this is what happened. The one on the right are not official. It's not official data, but it's something from the Quality of Life report from Bogotá Como Vamos. This is an organization that's, if you want to translate it, is Bogotá, how are we doing? Cities, how are we doing this? How are the cities doing on quality of life? And the measurement that they did, well, they did surveys, they did phone surveys because, of course, they couldn't go on sites. But we know that just before the pandemic, this was 2019, this was the beginning of 2020, 7.8 of surveyed people were using the bicycle. November 2020, it rose to 14.3%, almost as twice, a little bit more than twice than what the Household Travel Survey did. And then on February 2021, 13.3%. And now we're almost out of the pandemic. About a year ago, it's 9.3. So this is very interesting to see, because even though the number, our bicycle mode split rose, and now it's coming down, it did not come down to the 6.6%, the initial one. So we still have, we capture a few more people on the bikes. So how did this happen? Well, we need to understand that. That's what I'm going to show you in the next section. But I'm going to show you a couple of numbers that we collected at Despacio and from other from the Household Traveler Survey, so you can understand why we need these protected lanes. One is what is the gender mobility mode split in Bogota? This is from the Household Survey, the 2019 Household Survey. If you can see, bicycles, of course, this is in Spanish, but bicycles are that 6.6%, well, from that, about a quarter of the people who are using it are women. So that's not a good sign. We need, I don't know if you remember this, but there's some infrastructure usage or quality of service or level of service measurements. If you have a 50-50 gender split, it means that the infrastructure in your system is safe and women are going to be naturally are going to use it in a natural way. This is not happening in Bogota, so that's something that we need to improve. So having this gender index is going to help us understand what's going to happen. Another thing is that what's going on, this is the collision matrix. This is half in Spanish, half in English, I'm sorry. But this is the collision matrix. So what's going on there here? I don't know if you've seen a collision matrix, but this is the type of road user. You're gonna have see here the road user, and you're gonna have here what other user or other vehicle collision with it and killed it, that person. So let's see what happened with bicycles. Well, it's not as bad as motorcycles in Colombia, but bicyclists are crashing against motorcycles. Motorcyclists are against stationary objects, no information, freight transportation, buses, and individual transportation. So we need to understand what's going on with the safety of riders so we can understand how to protect them. And of course, these protected bike lanes are going to help us towards that. And one last thing before I show you the other the policies. This is something. This graph is from the women's account that Despacio led about 6 years ago. We need to update it, yes, but this is a very interesting information. It's showing us, I think, yeah, it's better if I explain this to you on this map. And it's, if you can see on the purple dots show us where, well, this is, you can call this, it's a collision or crash or death hotspots. So this is what collisions or deaths related to active mobility happened, and it will show us where, and this is where it happened, and this one is showing us where are more female deaths than male deaths. So male died predominantly on the purple lines, and women died predominantly on the red spots. So that's something really interesting, because it's showing us that if there are more, if you can see, this is showing us more or less what the map that Taylor shared this morning, that it's the main routes that you can see. I mean, these are the main routes, and men are dying on those routes, on those bike paths. Women are dying on separated spots. Those are neighborhood routes. There are non-protected lanes. So what's going on? Why are women running away from the protected lanes? Maybe it's because there's some personal safety. They fear their personal safety threatened, so maybe they're not using it. So that's something that we need to understand to develop the policies. We need to protect people who feel threatened, people who feel in danger because of other vehicles. So that's what happened in Bogota. That's what I understand, or what I believe that helped raise the numbers, the mode split, with the help of these programs. Well, the first of all is that during the pandemic, in the beginning, Bogota had 550 kilometers of protected bike lanes, not protected only, but bike lanes. During the pandemic, they added 117 more kilometers. So it's very interesting to see how many. It's, as you can see, this is what Taylor was showing us. It covers almost the entire city. And some of the temporary ones, the ones that are in yellow, the temporary ones, became standard, and now they're protected lanes because actually people understood that they need to use it. That they're really I'm gonna say, like, they're quicker. They connect longer trams of the city. So this is very interesting. This was based, most of them were designed or planned based on our Sunday ciclovia. I don't know if you know, but every Sunday, most of these lanes are closed for cars, and people just go and ride their bikes around. So the yellow network was traced using the ciclovia, so people were familiar with it. So this is very interesting. So that's the first policy: just expand your bicycle network to something that people are familiar with, and protect them. We have another thing that's called the centipede, where grown-ups walk their children to school. So this is a local from the mayor's office, from the mobility secretariat. It's a program where actually children play centipede, so they walk around their neighborhoods, just picking up kids from their neighborhood, and they go to school. So this is very important, because what they're doing here is that they're helping children be familiar with the street, know how to behave, how to interact with other pedestrians, with other vehicles. So that's how you're kind of lowering the risk of understanding how the street works. And also, this is also gender oriented, because if you teach children how to be independent, how to be autonomous, of course, there's going to be a less one less task for women in their care activities or trips. This is something really cool. I don't know if I can present it to you. This is called Let's Go to School by Bike. I don't know if you've seen this in Barcelona, in Paris, that they're showing how children go to school by bus. And this is something that has been has been done in Bogota for about 15 years, when they just ride around the bus with balloons, with toys, with games. So they're understanding how the road works, and how, as being part of the city on a bike, they know how to interact with with other vehicles, with pedestrians. They understand the laws and the norms of the road. So this is really cool. There's something else. Well, of course, the centipede is for, I'm going to say it's kindergarten children. The bike to school children is more primary school. And of course, the ones on high school, on junior high school, of course, they're not going they won't like to play with balloons or things like that. So they have something that's called like bici parceros, which is like bike partners for a little bit for bigger kids, not grown-ups, but kids. So of course they just lend them bikes, teach them how to behave, teach them how to understand the road. So you're working with the young population, so you can have in the future you can have safer adults who know how to interact with the road. And the last one, this is one that's really related to bicycles and pollution. This is something that the Secretariat of Mobility did with the help of Despacio, of course, with us, led by my coworker Camilo Urbano, and financed by the World Bank. And it's something that we saw that if it works in Germany, if it works in Europe, hello to everybody in Europe, good afternoon to everybody. If it worked in Europe, having something like a cross-docking platform, a collaborative cross-docking platform, what if we could do it in Bogota? Instead of having big trucks running around the city, polluting, being dangerous and posing a threat to children and adults on the roads, what if we share this information on how about if we deconcentrate? I'm going to use that word, but I'm sure it's not that's not the word. But what if instead of having the trucks running around the city, we collected everything on a small platform, and we use bicycles to deliver them to the final client, to the drugstore, to the small supermarket, the neighborhood supermarket. What if we do that instead of we change the trucks to to bikes. And just yesterday, this was shared with us just yesterday, that with this pilot program, Bogota avoided emitting 1.95 tons of CO2. So there you go. That's a big impact. Taylor, you can add 1.95 to the 22 that you already calculated. So you see, that's one of the important things, is that you are not only, you're not doing the lowering the emissions, but what you're also doing is trying to push that information or help that clean air from different flanks. So yeah, and I think that's my time for now. So thank you very much, Taylor. It's been a pleasure working with you.
It's been such a pleasure working with you, Mafe.
Hi, thank you so much for that, Mafe. That's amazing to hear so much detail about what's really happening in cities. I would encourage people to keep putting questions and thoughts into the Q&A box. We're answering some of them where they're more technical. Taylor's stepped up and done that, but there are still others that we will come back to. In order perhaps just to give us all a little bit of an extra perspective on the work that's been done, we have Philip here, Philip Amaral from the European Cyclists Federation, who has very kindly, and hopefully it wasn't too much of a difficulty, read through the report and is going to share with us some thoughts and some ideas and perhaps even some challenges that this work has presented. Once Philip has finished speaking, we'll turn to the questions we have and a couple that I have, and hopefully have a little time for discussion, although time is actually really tight. So over to you, Philip, for your thoughts.
Thank you, Sheila, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And yeah, good afternoon and good morning to everyone across the world. I'm in Brussels, so still very comfortably in the afternoon. Really, I want to start off by saying a huge congratulations to ITDP and to FIA Foundation for this report. I was, invited just recently to join here and to share some thoughts with you, but it was an absolute pleasure to read through the report and look at the tool. I mean, this is precisely what the cycling movement around the world needs. We need to be able to quantify and to say with a high degree of confidence how much benefits cycling infrastructure will bring. It's a crucial tool in our arsenal because we need to overcome years and years and decades, actually, of traffic management practice and traffic engineering practice, which has obviously, as we all know, prioritized the automobile. And in order to do that, to eventually overturn that, we need to be armed with facts and data. We need to be able to say precisely how installing cycling infrastructure in our cities will create benefits. And this is something that my organization, ECF, has done in the past, not to the same degree as this report. We've quantified some benefits of cycling. And as I was reading through this report, it just struck me how similar a lot of the findings are when I was comparing to some years back when ECF did its report on the benefits of cycling. Of course, we looked at about, I think it was 28, the 28 European countries, because the United Kingdom was still part of the EU then. We quantify that taken all together in a year, cycling would save, could save over 5 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe alone. So just imagine that on a global scale, and it's huge. We also looked at the mobility value of cycling. Over 6 billion saved on euros saved on congestion easing. Congestion times cut by millions of hours, reducing the need for car journeys with good cycle highways. The huge savings in not having to build new infrastructure for motorized transport by a city focusing on cycling transport and cycling infrastructure. So the benefits are huge. And in the cycling community, I think what this report does is just make it even more exceedingly clear what we all know, people, advocates and researchers in the mobility field, is that it's a no-brainer for a city to increase cycling. It's a no lose decision by a city to put cycling infrastructure. Now, of course, the challenge that we have is how to take these figures, which are really compelling, and at ECF we'll continue digging into these and digging into the tool, but they're really compelling. How to take these figures and to use them for persuasion, for influence, because I think that's still the real challenge. That's what we find here at ECF and in Europe. And just to say, in Europe, we have some cities and some, golden spots for cycling. Obviously Netherlands or Denmark or some places in Germany or otherwise. But Europe has tons to learn from other cities around the world, and tons of ways that Europe can improve. So what we find here in Europe that getting the hard facts and the data and the research and trying to use that to influence public opinion, to influence the actual actions of political actors who are dependent on their constituencies to stay in power, to stay in office. I think that's the real crux of the challenge. How do we make these numbers meaningful at a local level, and then really give politicians a reason to be courageous and take the steps to shift us away from private motorized transport to more cycling and other forms of sustainable transport. Now, in Europe, why I think this report is so valuable, Europe is really on the cusp of what I think, and all of us here at ECF think, is potentially a number of very good years for cycling. It's not guaranteed, but it's going in that way. And one of these is a number of changes in policies that are potentially happening that would lead to more cycling in cities. But one of them is the potential for it to be more strategic guidance and strategic planning Europe-wide on cycling. And I think this is really crucial. Anytime we look at a European country or any country in the world, the ones that are doing the best on this transformation for cycling are the ones that have devoted the time and resources and capacity to plan, to create cycling strategies or mobility strategies, to do the planning on how to shift away from private motorized transport to more cycling and walking and public transport. And these are the ones that reap the biggest gains. And I think a tool like this should be mandatory for any urban planning department, mobility planning department that wants to know exactly how much they're going to save on emissions, because this is the challenge for anywhere in Europe in the world. Again, in Europe, we've had at the highest levels of our political leadership say that Europe's climate goals can't be achieved without more cycling. That's something that ECF has been saying, and our partners we've been saying over and over again. So I think this concretizes that in a really great way. So I think, encourage ITDP and FIA to continue using this tool, and at ECF will be, using this in our ways and tinkering with your model and seeing how it applies to European cities. We'd love to continue that discussion. But I think there's a few extra things before I close out. One is the point about political persuasion. How do we use this to affect real change on the ground and convince political actors and citizens? Of course, when it comes to citizens, usually behavior changes happen when when the choices become easy. And for now, driving is the easiest choice for most people in the world, a lot of people in the world. We need to make cycling the easier choice. And I think that can happen. Behavior changes happen, just thinking, putting light bulbs in your house. Many of us now put more energy efficient light bulbs. There's been huge behavior change when it comes to smoking. And I think this is very much possible when it comes to mobility, but it takes investment and political will to make it happen, to make the easier choice. So I think there's that. And I think another challenge is we need more attention from banks. We need more attention from climate philanthropies. Or philanthropies writ large around the world, who are still, I think, struggling to dedicate the necessary amount of funds to fighting climate change. But within that, there's road transport, which contributes to or just transport writ large, which contributes to nearly 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And road transport the biggest portion of that. So we need to cut road transport greenhouse gas emissions all around the world. And you can do that in a number of ways, which we've all pointed out. But cycling, walking, public transport are a big part of those ways, and the most efficient of those ways, as pointed out in this report. So that, I think, for us here, that's a real challenge to the philanthropic community. How can we realize more of this research, and how can we realize more financing of investments in cycling infrastructure? I think that's crucial. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Philip, for those insights and reflections. And I hope on your very final point that FIA Foundation is seen to be leading the way amongst philanthropic activity. We certainly seek always to try to promote interesting and new areas of evidence, but also very much to catalyze other bigger spenders, because we're a baby in the field to bring their resources to bear also. And I think when evidence is as strong and clear as this, then that hopefully helps move that money alongside the much greater finances that we need to move as well. Now, we have excited through these great presentations quite a few, I think, really good questions. And one that I'd like to just go to first is really for Taylor, which is the question that was put into our Q&A box by Benny. And he's very interested to know the transferability. And I think this has come up in a few different places in the chat. I think Aaron made the point earlier also. So we haven't much time. If you can be super brief, everyone, if I give you, Taylor, can you reflect for everyone on the call from all corners of the world how truly applicable this tool is and what tinkering might need to be done?
Yeah, so this is a very common question, Benny, and thank you for asking it. The model is really fine-tuned to apply to middle-income cities and middle-income countries. It can certainly be used in cities in low or high-income countries, Europe, the United States, Africa, but you might want to increase the uncertainty range a little bit. It'll be a little bit less precise. Overall, though, I would actually expect networks of protected bicycle lanes to have a much higher impact in higher income countries because there are more cars to shift out of. Higher proportion of people drive cars.
And generally higher incomes in place, so benefits always in that sense being valued higher. But thank you for that, Taylor. We then have a couple of questions more directly for you, Mafe, and your presentation in Bogota, which I hope you've looked in the chat, many very positive elements of feedback there about the work you're doing and so on. Philip made the point that one of the key things we've got to do here is sway people, move people, convince people. So somebody in the chat, Ross in the chat, in the Q&A, wonders what sort of consultation process you had around the changes that you've been introducing, particularly around the bike lanes. And I think linked to that, so if you can also reflect on this, Flavio is interested in the very specific issue that the business might raise around cargo bikes and the security of their goods. So if you can just reflect on how you consulted and if any particular constituencies have particular concerns or issues, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, we are very at Despacio, we're very proud of our gender studies related to mobility, because that's where the like you said, like we said in Spanish, that's where the juice of the information is. Okay, now first, car people are always going to be against bicycle infrastructure, no matter where you are. You're always going to find that those comments on this only happens in city name because politician name or governmental name does this, it's bad planning, it's everything. But from what we know that happens in Bogota is the Secretariat of Mobility uses a lot of data from Waze, from Strava, from Google Maps, Google Earth, from from our phones, from everything that our phone captures. They understand how people move, so they know how bikers move, so they understand their demands. And of course, there's always going to be a lot of vote against that. But this was something else that we were talking about just recently, is that now politicians use bicycles as one of their topics. Nobody and it's there's something that I think our executive director now says that nobody in Bogota or in Colombia wins an election without talking about bikes, because they know that now there's a movement and then there's a demand. Even though it's good, even though it has a lot of people against, it's going to move very good people, and people are going to push for those policies. So it's now part of our DNA, I guess. And regarding the other question, I think I saw it from Flavio about the cross-docking project. Well, I was just consulting with Camilo Urbano, who led that project, and he was just telling me that part of the planning of the entire cross-docking process was making sure that those goods that needed freezing or needed like a cold chain process had the entire process had to be work around, so those specific products were the ones kind of delivered in one line. They were not standing still, thawing under I don't know, a cart or something. So it was just a continuous flow of those particular products. But that's kind of part of the puzzle. How are you going to move goods? And you have some restrictions. You can move. I remember that from from the little that I worked with them, it was a coordinated work within uh, Frito-Lay and Bimbo and chips and some other goods that were easier to move around, and those that needed particularly like the cold chain had a specific particular treatment. So yeah, that's part of the puzzle that you have to play. So don't
Yeah,
let those unthaw.
I think it's fair, though, isn't it, to say that people have struggled with just as complex a set of issues around all types of delivery and freight, and they just happen to be in motorized vehicles. So I think the idea that it's just complicated, I think, is no real objection ultimately in the end. I think
Exactly.
I think we get around that. So I'm mindful of the time. We are now just a few minutes out from our close, but I'm curious from all of you, actually. Philip, I'll start with you if I may. Just a very few words. We've talked all about cycling in this hour. We've heard so many great things, but obviously there's more that we kind of have to do. Mafe made the point about the differences in gender, for example. What would you say were the things that we need to do to complement cycling infrastructure and protected bicycle lanes to get to this really big challenge around the non-motorized mobility options? And in just a few words, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that need to happen is to enable people to have access to bikes and to cycle, and to especially focused on marginalized communities, people who are living in communities that are suffering from transport poverty where they don't have options. So this means governments that provide money directly to citizens, financial incentives, reductions in e-bikes or normal bikes, cargo bikes especially. I think that's key. And I think also employers can participate in this, finding ways to provide direct benefits to their employees, safe parking at the place of location, reimbursements for people who cycle to work. I think these are some of the additional things that when you complement it with cycling infrastructure, really get you going in the right way.
And when you consider how much is given over to fossil fuel subsidy and the subsidization and tax benefit of many other motorized options, then again, there's a pretty good model and there should be far less objection. Taylor, just a few words from you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that bicycling infrastructure really is just one part of the whole sustainable mobility system. Nobody's going to be able to do absolutely everything they need by bicycle. They'll also need access to public transit. They'll need comfortable and safe walking environment and a pleasant one. And so we can't just, and it all also comes down to land use as well. Cities need to be compact and cities need to be built for walking, cycling, and public transit. We can't just install bicycle lanes in the sprawling suburbs of the United States and expect them to be as successful as they could be. We also need to redesign the cities around bicycle lanes. And that also includes measures to reduce traffic for cars, right? To measures like congestion pricing, low emission zones, or especially parking reform to sort of to bring the cost of driving in line with its negative externalities, which will help people also shift toward bicycling from driving.
Thank you, Taylor. Now, we are out of time. On that last point of yours, Taylor, I would point to another project that the FIA Foundation supports, the Real Urban Emissions Initiative, which is working with mayors around the world to support low emission zone design in support of a cleaner future and cleaner cities. Sorry that I'm not going to be able to come to you, Mafe, again. I have to wind this up, and there are still a couple of questions I think we may not have got to, but thankfully everyone on this call can, I think, track us down and track you down as the authors and Philip at ECF if those questions, to have those questions answered later. So I have to just finish by saying thank you so much for being part of our panel today, for sharing your work from my perspective, for doing the work, because we are very delighted at the foundation that you have done this and that we all now have this in our locker as a tool and as a resource to make the case for cycling. So I think now I just hand back to you, Ivona, and we can close up.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Sheila, for this wonderful wrap up and also queuing all the questions. So I'll just bring us to the finish line. Again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to the speakers sharing your insights and the exciting work that you are doing. I just wanted to invite everyone for the upcoming session. It will be with our 2022 Sustainable Transport Award cities, as well as with 2023 applicant. This will be focusing on creating sustainable mobility solutions, equitable mobility in the 3 places. So the link is in the chat. Please sign up for this amazing opportunity. Please also follow us on Twitter for the latest releases and events. And again, thank you so much for joining today. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivona, and thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for the
Bye
invitation.
bye. Thanks, everyone.